you're thinking about running across the country in a challenge you call the transcontinental run. Can you describe this challenge and what the heck you're thinking?
Yeah. So this is, one thing that is exciting about ultra marathons. I think in a lot of places, especially early in someone's ultra marathon adventure, if they decide to do that as a, part of their life, is you have like these early years where you're doing things for the first time, and it's like so cool and scary at the same time to think, today I'm going to run 100 miles, and the furthest I've ever run before is 50 or something like that. And you just know you're going to do something that you've never done before. You're going to experience things you would have never been able to predict. And it's like this really interesting, unique, like human experience, I think. So for me, I've spent most of my career at this point, like I got through that phase in a lot of the events I'm really interested in. And then it was like, now let's repeat it and see if we can do it better. Mm-hmm. And you get into that mindset for a while, which is also a fun mindset. But there is that kind of like desire to kind of have that human experience again of like, not knowing what could happen or is this doable type of a thing, but still doing it and figuring it out along the way. So I would describe the Transcontinental Project as something like that. It's not anything unique to me or anything new. There's been a lot of people who've done it before, but essentially it's a route. There's different routes. There's one kind of main one that's done for like that is used as the record route, more or less, that you go from San Francisco to New York, and essentially you live out of an RV while you're running. So you run as much as you can during the day, then you go to bed at night, and then you get up and do it again. And you're handling all the logistics and the process of trying to make sure you can get up the next day and do again what you did the day before, which is going to be the biggest difference. So for me, I've done all single day ultra marathons where you're going to wring yourself dry at knowing the next day or week or however long you need, you're going to be able to just kind of like shut everything down and let everything catch back up. Whereas with this, like, you're doing it again and again and again.
Yeah.
And, the record is by a guy named Pete Kostelnick, who averaged just over 72 miles a day, finished in 42 days, 6 hours and 30 minutes. And I mean, just like 72 miles, 73 miles, and then like next day again, just knowing every day when you finish, you spend a whole day running and then, okay, I'm gonna go to bed. I'm gonna wake up in the morning. I'm gonna have to do this again. And then, have that happen for 6 weeks. And that's if it goes very well.
So luck, I assume, is a big part of this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just so many variables that are uncontrollable on this type of an experience, just because, I mean, you go over the Sierras, maybe you hit a storm. You try to time it. Most people do it start in September, so you can get over the mountain passes without a big storm coming through. But then also get to the East Coast before it's like the middle of winter. So like early September start is kind of ideal. But you can, I mean, Pete was very fortunate from a weather standpoint. I think he made one big mistake. We got a little too aggressive in the beginning, had to take a full day off. So he actually averaged, from a moving day standpoint, closer to 75 miles per day. Wow. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be things that I can't prepare for or won't know it's going to happen. And, a lot of that a lot of the logistical stuff will get leaned on with the crew. Mm-hmm. So that's the hardest part right now, is just like getting all of that put together, where it's like, okay, I need to have the RV ready. I need to have all the stuff. We need to have the places figured out where we're going to stop, and the people that can, dedicate that much time to an activity like that. There's a lot of moving parts even before you start the adventure itself.
When are you? So you're taking the San Francisco to New York, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when are you doing the run?
September 1st is when, barring anything like catastrophic between now and then.
This is really exciting, but I mean, it's incredible. So you'll probably have a bunch of people just randomly running with you. Are people going to be tracking where you're located?
Yeah, so I'll be documenting everything because, my hope is that I'm doing it primarily to raise awareness for Fight for the Forgotten, Justin Wren's charity. But with that said, I think I am capable of, if I have a good experience, chasing the record or going after the record, or at least getting close to it. So,
oh shit! So you're gonna try to beat this record?
Yeah, I'm gonna go out with I'm gonna structure the process in a way that leaves that door open, is the way I would describe it. I'm gonna try not to do anything that would potentially put it in a situation where that becomes the primary goal, just because I want to make sure that the reason I decided to do in the first place was for Fight for the Forgotten. So I want to make sure that I don't end up 2/3 of the way across the country with a broken leg and I'm like, hey guys, I guess the donation button's turned off.
So focus on, like, don't sacrifice that,
right?
That goal. But also there's a community aspect to it, mm-hmm. that I feel like, are you going to, I mean, so you're going to document and post,
yeah.
But are you going to also, is there a safety perspective here? It's like the Forrest Gump thing. Mm-hmm. You might have large numbers of crowds that run along with you for a while. Are you
Yeah,
worried about that kind of thing?
I wouldn't say I'm worried about it. I mean, I think there's remote enough spots along the way where you'll get some alone time more likely. I don't necessarily mind if people want to jump in. There'll be some people that will definitely want to do that, and they can come in. But the reality is, like, it's probably not going to be a scenario where there's, like, 40 people following me at all times.
You say that now.
Yeah, you never know.
Just
Wait for this podcast.
yeah, and then if Joe finds out you're doing this, then we're really in trouble. All right. So, I mean, what are the things that you think will be the hardest for you? And also, like, how do you train for this kind of thing? And what are the hardest things you anticipate, and how do you train for them?
Yeah, so the way I'm looking at this is it's much less about performance from the traditional sense where I need to be able to be X fit. I think I need to be injury proof. That's what's going to be the detriment. If you think about it, like, if I manage to average 9-minute mile pace for a day, that would be 80 miles in a 12-hour time frame. So I'll easily have 12 hours of moving time per day. 9-minute pace, I think, is slow enough that it's not an unreasonable clip. So, like, when I mean, obviously there's things that slow you down, or I'll probably take walking breaks, stopping breaks. You got to stay on top of nutrition. That's the other big thing too. I'm, probably eating like anywhere between 10 to 15,000 calories a day, which is, I can probably count on my hand a couple of occasions where I've eaten that much in my life. So now I got to do that for 6+ weeks in a row.
And you don't want to have any stomach problems.
Right.
Try to minimize the amount of stomach problems. So would you estimate about 12 to 13 to 14 hours of running every day?
Yeah, that's probably, like, from the first step to the last step, it'll probably be somewhere around, like, say 14 hours, 13 hours or something like that would be a pretty good estimate.
And then getting rest. And then minimizing the risk of injury, which could be as small as like literally uneven surfaces resulting to like stepping the wrong way. I mean, that's going to be a lot of steps.
Yeah.
So the probability of injury, are you worried about that kind of stuff? Can you strengthen the ankles or those kinds of things that prevent possibility of injury?
And that's where I'm putting a lot of my focus in is, I think, like, just being running fit is going to be, like, generally speaking, is going to be important. I think just from a lifetime of running is going to be a huge advantage. A lot of these, like, kind of like mechanical movements are going to be very established. It's just going to be about, can I tolerate that volume of it? I think that I'm doing more strength work. I think this is something where it's like, maybe adding 5 pounds of lower body muscle is going to be an advantage versus a disadvantage when you're looking at power weight ratio. Cause I just I never need to be running a 6:48 mile for this adventure. So I'm looking at that. I'm doing a lot more of that stuff, focusing on that. The training is changing a fair bit where it's more polarizing versus kind of being, I mean, I've always had some polarization in my training, but this is even to an extreme where, like, I'm going to do some simulations where, I go out and do 2 or 3 days where I target the exact thing I will be doing on the transcon.
You were on Instagram posting about these simulated runs. So you legitimately, like, trying to perfectly copy what would happen in 1, 2, or 3 day segment on that run.
Yeah. Just to kind of start to weed out where are the potential problems. So let's say I do a 2 or 3 day simulation where I'm averaging 70 miles a day, and I find out at the end of 3 days, there's a really weak spot here. I need to address that, or I need to find a way to make that not a weak spot. I think that's the only way to really get as close as you can to avoiding injury.
Have you done that yet? Have you done a 2-day 70 mile? Like, even that's incredibly difficult.
I haven't yet. I'm going to build up to it, because that's the other thing too, is I don't think you want to be so aggressive with that where you get injured trying to figure out how not to get injured. So what I'm going to start, what I just started last week is it looks really weird on my training schedule, because, like, last week I ran almost 150 miles, but I took 2 days off. So it's like, usually for me to get to 150 miles, that's a 7-day training week. So that's the way I'm doing it. Like, I did a day where I did, 2, like, just over 20 milers separated by just a couple hours. And within that couple hours, I did like a 3-mile walk. The following morning, I woke up and ran, I think it was like just over 36 miles first thing in the morning, just to get an idea of just, like, kind of like, what is it like to be, I mean, this was in Phoenix too, so it was 100 degrees for the majority of that.
So to suffer, then rest, and suffer again, how that feels.
There's enough precedent with this sort of an activity where, like, everyone I've talked to so far has told me like there is going to be like this kind of like gradual decline in the early stages where you're just like, okay, it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's getting worse. And you hit a point where you're just like, it hits kind of rock bottom, and then like it starts to kind of gradually improve. So you kind of have to let yourself it's weird. I think I can maybe eliminate, I'm trying to find a way to eliminate some of that by doing the simulations. Whereas from what I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of people do the simulation route yet. I've seen people just do like a lot of training and then say like, okay, I'll spend the first 7 to 10 days adapting to this, and then I'll get comfortable within this environment and be fine. Whereas I'm going to try to get to a point where like some of that is already kind of cleared up before I start, but not so much that I'm like adding like an extra essential week to the trip worth of running.
What do you think will be the hardest simulated run leading up to it? Like, will you do 3 days?
Yeah, I think I'll probably try to do 3 days, somewhere between 70 and 80 miles each will be kind of like the goal.
Will that be in August, do you think? How close to?
Yeah, I would like it to be in August. Like early August would be ideal. I think like maybe the first week in August, because that gives me kind of 3 weeks to let things kind of settle down from that. But
This is crazy. This is incredible.
it's actually interesting because like if let's say I did the simulation now, the problem with that is like the adaptations from just like the breakdown and the strengthening would likely be gone unless I did it again. So I want to inch up to it so that like, and get close enough to the starting date so that I'm still kind of like, holding on to that adaptation when I start it. So then those first few days maybe aren't quite as miserable.
And you said if everything goes amazing and you're challenging the record, it'll be like a 42-day run.
Yeah, so that's what the record is, almost exactly 6 weeks. And that's at 72.5 miles per day. So
will you be posting online and like,
yeah, people? Instagram's going to be a big one. I think I might do a few like YouTube stuff along the way too. Yeah, I'm still ironing out exactly how much. I think at minimum I'll do some Instagram stuff. I think I'll go live on Instagram a few times during the day when I take like walking breaks. Partly just to kind of, I think keeping people in, I mean, it stays true to the goal of raising awareness, but it also, I find when you bring people in, there is an added pressure to that, but there's also this sense that I've learned from the treadmill experience, since we had like a pretty big production for that, in the sense that, I mean, as much as you can turn on a camera in your own house, but like I remember thinking we had like 30 people lined up to come in and guest speak during that. And there was points of that where I was like, you get that voice we talked about at the beginning where it's like, maybe you could quit. Like, do you really need to run 100 miles on a treadmill? Is this really going to be valuable for you?
Yeah.
And then you think about, oh, you know what? There's, Courtney DeWalter, one of the best female ultra runners to ever exist, is taking 30 minutes to an hour out of her day to come on in 2 hours to, help me, amplify this event. And do I really want to be sending emails out to these people saying, hey guys, I know you were gracious enough to block out time of your day. I think there's a little bit of that to do where you're like, you're jumping in with the community that is following along and saying, here's how things are going, show them the best, the worst, and everything in between. And then ultimately have that hold you accountable a little bit too. It's like hard to get up in the morning and not go back out.
I don't know how you are, but I had to, whenever I did any kind of physical stuff, like the 48-hour challenge or just any kind of running, I hated turning on the camera. I hated it. Like, because you have to like smile and be friendly and stuff.
Oh, I'm just going to be super miserable if I'm
miserable. Well, that's it. So like, exactly. In some sense, that's what people...
Are we going to get a happy Zach or an angry Zach?
Exactly. It's like you're making bets. And I'm sure there'll be some days, maybe not many, maybe very few, where you're truly happy with yourself. Like for some weird ecstatic reason, maybe if you get over the hump, whatever that you mentioned, that this dip. I mean, it's fascinating how much suffering this actually entails. I wonder.
Well, and one thing I'm going to definitely try to leverage to my advantage, and one of the reasons why I think Fight for the Forgotten was the charity that really triggered me to decide to do this. The transcontinental route was something I learned about early in my ultra running career, and I thought to myself, I want to do that someday, but it was one of those kind of far off distance things that had never really like actualized in your mind until you put a date down or mention it on the Joe Rogan Experience or something like that. When then it's like people want to know, when is this happening? And what I try to think about is, the reason Justin identified the Pygmy tribe was because they were super forgotten, where, we think about just like some of these third world countries where, it's a scenario of like some people, it's easy for us here in the US to think to ourselves, well, why don't they just industrialize? Why don't they just like, start to innovate a bit? Why are they so primitive? What's wrong with them? And in reality, like when you when you scale things down to the degree where you need the entire day because of the situation you're in just to take care of your basic needs of water and food, you never get the opportunity to even build a real like establishment or, build on that. Like you need the free time, or you need a portion of your population to have the free time available to innovate. And the Pygmy tribe just hadn't had that historically. In fact, they weren't even considered humans by like the local government for quite some time. And, the people that really pay the price in some of these situations are the women, because they're the ones that get saddled with like the water gathering and things like that. So the reason that Justin picked wells to build was because he thought to himself, if we can get them wells, then now these women don't have to spend all day walking and carrying water. Now they can just get that water, and now we have half their population freed up for other things. Now maybe they can start farms, they can build some housing and stuff like that, and it exponentially improves once you take care of some of those big key early things. So when I'm thinking about like, do I really need to go out here and travel another 12 hours a day? My mind's going to hopefully go to, well, if one of those women woke up in the Pygmy tribe one morning and decided, you know what, do I really need to go get water today? Right. It's like, well, yeah, you do. you really do have to.
Yeah, you're running for them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that will give you fuel, hopefully. But
yeah. I mean, the reality is always there where I don't have to do it. Like they do have to do it. So, but I think just keeping that perspective, it puts us back to the beginning where this is one of those situations where I think it's like a no quit situation. You have to put yourself in a no quit situation here, because it's it's just bigger than you.
I can't wait to see like the dark places you go. I mean, there's some, the quit situations, and hopefully we get to have a glimpse of those, because I think those are really inspiring when somebody is both gets broken by them, because you know how tough you are, but also is almost broken and overcomes it. I mean, that's just a fascinating story. So I can't wait.